Hi, I'm Holliea and this is Shae. We just wanted to do a short little video to teach about the natal moon phase return. Shae's an astrologer and her business is called Astro Healing, and she's going to teach us how to work out what moon phase we were born on. Just found that the apps online aren't accurate enough. So you've got the possibility to ovulate and conceive. Each month there's a second chance to release an egg on your natal moon phase return each month. So sometimes your physical ovulation and your natal moon phase return will connect and be at the same time. Like my physical ovulation usually is at the same time as my natal moon phase return. This is also a time of real, a lot of heightened creativity and fertile aspects in your life will be enhanced, just like your physical ovulation. So yeah, we'll start speaking more about how to calculate and work it out, and through that we'll explain it a little bit more. So yeah, is there anything you wanted to add to that, Shae, before we go on to how to calculate it?
No, I don't think so. No,
cool.
Not just yet.
All right. So we're going to get my chart up. Okay. So this is my astrology chart. So you can go to astro.com and you can put in your birth details, and this will bring up your astrology chart, which I know can look a little bit intimidating if you haven't looked at one before. But Shae was saying to me yesterday that it's quite important to have your actual birth time. If you can explain about that, Shae, and you can use the mouse to...
Okay, yeah. So if an example would be, so in astrology we use the 12, we've got the 12 signs, like the 12 astrological signs around here. But with the moon phases, there's 8 moon phases that we go by. So whereas the signs are given 30 degrees, the actual moon phase is given 45 degrees. So Dane Rudger, he does a lot on the moon phases, and he, for lots of different reasons, came up with that the 8 worked the best with the moon phases. So for an example, if I have chart that I just did the other day for someone, and their natal moon phase was at 311 degrees. So 311 degrees, at 315 degrees, it would actually change to the last moon phase, which would be balsamic. But at 311, this person is still actually last quarter moon phase. So in an example like that, where it's getting close to the cusp, to the changeover, then the time is important, because if the time was, if they were born 2 hours later, they would actually be in the balsamic. So it's not the birth time, because the moon changes every 2.5 days. For some people, if their moon's coming up 15 degrees of a sign smack in the middle, it's the time, you've got some leeway there. It's not going to change the phase nor the sign. But for some people, their moon sign is actually right at the end, and then in that instance, it could actually even change what sign the moon's in, as well as the actual phase can be changed. So
Namaya's actually, she's 29 degrees, I'm pretty sure, her moon.
Yeah, Namaya is. So in that instance, then obviously it's where it's on the 2.5 day and it's about to change. If it's close to that, then the person obviously needs to know their time, because that will change also.
And how can someone, if someone doesn't know their birth time, how can they find out what their birth time is?
Yeah, so so lots of people have been doing this lately with my readings. Actually, we've got forms. Me and Holly have them that we can send to you. And so for Mum, for instance, she's 64 now, so she thought that they wouldn't have her birth records in archives, but the hospitals actually keep them for 100 years in their archives. And even if you're living in a country that's not where your birth is, you can, because it's online, you just send the forms back to, so for us, Mum was born in Grafton, but she still just sent the records that she had back to filled them out and sent them back to the John Hunter, because the John Hunter keeps the archives for this. I think it must be a fairly big portion of hospitals around this part of New South Wales. They're all held in archives at the in records at the John Hunter, and they have to actually keep 100 years worth.
Yeah.
So unless you're over 100.
Yeah.
I haven't done any readings for people over 100 yet.
It's quite cool to go back over your birth record as well. It can bring up some emotional stuff through reading what happened during your birth. So definitely recommend doing that. And it just makes it more precise with the chart. You can get a chart reading if you can't get your birth time. You can have a chart reading, but it's just not as precise, hey?
Yeah, so some people will say to me, I'm not exactly sure on the birth time, should I go ahead with it? And if you don't know the birth time, the ascendant, and therefore the in astrology, the planets are going to be in different houses, but for most people, all their planets' signs will stay the same. The only one, again, that can change is the moon, because it's so quickly moving. Like it's because it moves every 2.5 days.
So is it 2.5 days per sign, or is it
per sign?
And then how quick does the phases change?
No, it's the phases. It's a little bit different because it's because it's 2.5 days for the sign, but the phases are a little bit longer, but they start different. Like it's the time that it's starting and beginning, and because we're breaking it down into 8 then instead of 12, starts and it ends at different times. So
all right, so we're going to look at my chart that we've got up here, and Shae's going to teach us how to look at the chart and calculate from our sun to our moon. The distance is then the degrees, which is then what moon phase it is. So
okay, so when we look at planets, we can have like all planets have a relationship with each other. So when you're working out the phasal degrees, you can do it for any of the planets, but when we're doing the moon phase, we're going between the sun and the moon, because they're our two biggest luminaries that we're working with. So you go with which one? So the sun, you actually start with the one that's the slowest moving, and in any way you would start with the sun, because the sun's sort of like the biggest luminary that we're working with. So in moon cycles, we're starting at the sun, so the sun's a stationary point, and then we're going clockwise around to where Holliea's moon is. So the way I do it quickly is I go, so starting, her sun's at 9 degrees of Virgo. So
it's the little 9 next to the sun.
So her little 9's there and next to the sun. So 9 degrees Virgo.
The big number. What's the little number?
The little number's the minutes as well. So it's even more.
Okay, wow. Okay, I didn't know that. So the big number next to it. Sorry. That's what we're looking at.
So the big one, the 9. Okay, so Hollie's goes, so we would go from here, the way I quickly calculate it in my head all the time is to go up by 30. So I would go
30.
Just the signs. This is how I'll work it out.
Each sign is 30 degrees.
30. Okay, so if I'm doing this, I would go, okay, so 30 degrees would take me to 9 degrees Libra, 60, 9 degrees at Scorpio, 90 would be 9 degrees Sagittarius, 120 would take me to 9 degrees of Capricorn, 150 would take me to 9 degrees of Aquarius, 180 is 9 degrees Pisces. So this is where you would get, if her moon was here, this is where you would get a full moon, because it's in this, the sun and the moon are in the opposite sign. So Virgo and Pisces are opposite. So 180 would be 9 degrees Pisces. 210 would take me to 9 degrees Aries, and then 240 would take me to 9 degrees Taurus. But because Hollie's at 22 degrees with her moon in Taurus, then you have to add another 13 degrees.
Maths in everything. My mind just shuts off as soon as numbers are being talked about. So.
So Hollie's is 240 plus 13. So she's 253 degrees moon phase, which is a disseminating moon. So she's gone on the disseminating moon phase.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yes.
So, and then if your moon and sun are right next to each other?
Yeah, so if your moon, so if you're, yeah, if it comes up and your moon is right here, so it's before the sun, you actually have had to go the whole, to calculate it, you go the whole way around, and then the moon's right here. So even if this person, even if Holly had her moon at say 4 degrees of Virgo, so it's just here, she's actually on a balsamic. That would be the balsamic moon phase, that's the end. Now if Holly's moon was at 11 or 12 degrees of Virgo and the moon was therefore right there on the chart, then she's on a new moon. So as soon as the moon's in front of the sun, clockwise, it's moving that way, it's new moon. If it's at the end, so the moon's there, she's on a balsamic.
Mm-hmm.
Which is totally different in its energy. So even though they're both in the same sign, you can either get a new moon with that arrangement or a balsamic moon, depending on if the moon's before the sun or after it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So now we can talk. Do you want to look a little bit about the moon phases and what they sort of their qualities?
It'd be great to share both. So I will just get up. Go. Okay, so here's the moon phases. All right, so we're just going to start with the new moon phase, which is, like you said, which would be right next to your sun.
Yep.
0 to 45 degrees.
Yep. Okay, so this actual sheets come from Beatrice, our teachers. We thought we would acknowledge her first.
Yeah, from Pantrix in Thailand, so pantrix.net. And this is a bit of psychology. Obviously the moon phase that you were born on then represents psychologically how you interact with the world, I guess.
Yeah. And so
creative potential maybe.
Yeah. So Beatrice herself, I think, has taken some of this from Dane Rudger, but in her own sort of way that she's interpreted. So anyway, so we're working on the next page. We'll have the others, but there's 8 moon phases. So the new moon is sort of like the birth. It's sort of related to Aries energy, as in it's like the birth or a beginning of a new cycle. But it's sort of tricky depending, there's so much to astrology, it's very complex, but you can actually get someone with a Pisces sun and moon, which is, so Pisces is like the ending. You can get someone with a Pisces sun and moon, or even Pisces sun, moon, and the south node of the moon, which would actually be it can be very, very wise soul, but then they're actually born on a new moon, and this would indicate that this cycle that they're doing is something new. So when someone's born on a new moon, it's the birth of a new cycle of something, whether it's like a new cycle of how they're going to do their work in this lifetime, or how they're going to communicate differently. So yeah, the new moon is sort of, it's things like it can be innocent and naive in its cycle because it's a new thing for them, in how they're sort of being out there in society. But new moon people are sort of usually really proactive, and it has that sort of connection to Aries in the way that it's Aries are sort of going headstrong, like with all this sort of excitement, but naive in the way of how it's going to go, but they're not really thinking of the deep ways it's going to go. It's just more like, okay, let's move forward. Like, so it's the emergence of, or something new is emerging. And then the crescent moon.
Before we go on, I just wanted to remind also about the lunar fertility. So with someone on the new moon, that means if their natal is a new moon, that means that they have the possibility to ovulate on the new moon, which on the grand scale, if you're connected with the moon cycles and you're actually bleeding on the new moon and ovulating on the full moon, that means that maybe you would have the chance to ovulate just before your cycle comes. Or these people, if you are on a new moon, natal moon, it could also, maybe you bleed on the full moon and your physical ovulation and your natal lunar fertility is connected. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just interesting because that's opposite. So if anyone is the new moon natal, has a natal new moon, I'd love to hear from you to see where your cycle's at, and if you do bleed or ovulate on the full moon, would be interesting to hear back, so I can start to do a bit of a study and learn more about this stuff myself. Yeah, so moving on to crescent moon.
So crescent moons, these things.
So 45 to 90 degrees.
Yeah, it's sort of, I guess, a little bit more related to Taurus in the way that it's not as brand new as Aries, but it's when it comes to Taurus, something's starting to sort of settle a little bit more, and they're sort of still digging into what their project is. And so when it happens on a monthly cycle, when we're going, it's by the time it's to crescent moon, we've already maybe set new intentions for the new moon. By the time it gets to the crescent moon, it's a little bit more becoming a little bit more material. It's sort of starting, it's not as naive and brand new. It's sort of starting to settle a little bit into what our intentions were. So it is a little bit more connected to Taurus in that way. More earthly, and it's starting to become more manifest.
Yeah.
Okay, and then first quarter. If first quarter is our first square, where the sun and the moon are in the square. So in astrology, aspects are really important, and squares are more challenging. So when something's in a square, when planets are in square to each other, it's bringing up more struggle. But some Western astrologers will still look at squares in aspects in charts and say, oh, that's going to be a bit more difficult and not as fortunate, I guess. But as in everything in the Eastern world or in Eastern philosophy, they see, because in the West we like to hold on a little bit to and resist change and resist anything that's going to sort of rock us a little bit and take us out of our comfort zone or our safety net. Whereas in the East, they sort of embrace this change because they know it's a big opportunity to learn something from it. And if they can consciously go through a challenge and come out wiser on the other side, then it's obviously growth. It's a big opportunity to evolve in something and move forward if you can do it consciously. So the first quarter and later the last quarter, these are the two squares that we face in astrology. So there's more challenge, I guess, with the moon phase.
It's 90 to 135 degrees.
Yeah. But I don't know, I don't want to go too complex, but you can in a first quarter, it's possible to get two signs, the moon and the sun, in the same sign. So for example, one of my brothers, he has first quarter moon phase, but his sun is Scorpio and his moon is Pisces. So they're both water signs. So it's a little bit, even though this is the more where the tension comes up and more the lessons or the sort of struggle in some ways. If it's in the same element or water element, then it's a little bit more harmonious than if it's in, so Mum, on the other hand, also has first quarter, but hers are in Aquarius to Taurus. So they're conflicting energies in a way. So it makes it a little bit challenging. So anyway, first quarter is crisis in action. So, and it's these things. It's like tension between the self and the group, concerns with justice. And it's the first real crisis point where they're sort of like, okay, how do I move forward in an action way? Because my, like one part of me is telling me to do this and the other part is telling me I need to move, but I'm sort of, it's like a standstill where it's not always easy to move forward. It's like there's something got to be stationary or learnt from the experience before, there can sort of be breakthroughs with people in this first quarter. Yeah.
And I just wanted to add, just back to the fertility side of things again, what you can do is learn what these moon phases actually physically look like up in the sky. And if you can be diligent enough to keep an eye on what the moon looks like, and it'll actually wax on one side and then wane on the other side. So here the new moon is no moon, and then crescent moon, there'll be a tiny little slit of light in the moon, and then for first quarter's that little bit more light, and then we're coming down now to the gibbous moon, which is just over half.
No, it's before
right?
before half.
Before half?
Yeah.
Sorry, so first quarter. Is first quarter half then?
First quarter. So yeah, new moon is, if it's on the very first day of the new moon, it's like still dark, really, yeah. Like, and then if it's moving, because it's still 2.5 days, if it's moving, you know, a little bit, then it'll be a tiny slit. Crescent moon's like the one that looks like when we draw the moon.
Yeah.
And then first quarter's getting a little bit thicker, like towards nearly half.
Yeah.
Gibbous is before the full moon, so that's next.
Okay.
So
yeah,
just
before full moon.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, learning what these phases actually physically look like in the sky. And for your lunar fertility, there's 3 days around, so a day after and a day before and a day after your natal moon phase that you have the potential to be fertile. And you will feel this creative energy in yourself. But I feel like for the actual physical release of an egg at this time, I feel like there's so much creative and fertile energy built up in the body. I personally feel like there needs to be an orgasm, say, so that energy then releases a physical egg. That's something that I just wanted to add into there, but I don't know, maybe it's not necessary, but yeah, it's something to keep an eye on anyway. So just moving now on to the gibbous moon phase.
Yeah, so gibbous is sort of related to Virgo. They can relate. So all of these, because there's only 8, but there's 12 signs, they're not all related to an energy, but it's for some of them, the astrologers have come up with how they sort of relate and the energy it feels like. So gibbous is related to Virgo energy in that people born on the gibbous moon are a big part of them is of being of service, which is a Virgo trait.
And that's 135 to 80 degrees, the gibbous moon.
Yeah. I won't go to because we're going a bit long now. Okay, so full moon for me, it feels like I'm on a full moon actually, but it feels for me like 2 different energies. In the way a person expresses themselves, it can feel a little bit like Leo energy because the sun and the moon are both opposition now, and so from Earth's perspective, we can see the full sun and the full moon. So the sun's illuminating the moon, vice versa. So they're both sort of bringing each other out into full view. So in that way, it's sort of like Leo energy because it's out there. People are getting sort of more attention. This moon.
Full moon people, you can tell they've got that presence about them. But interesting, reflecting on your cycle, is that your body favours ovulating on the full moon and bleeding on the new moon. You seem to flip back to that. So it's like your lunar fertility and your physical fertility and ovulation like to be in alignment, but of course it can change. So but then in a relationship way, it's meant to be like Libra energy because the sun and the moon are the 2 biggest luminaries, and they're obviously in a relationship with each other. So when it's coming to personal relationships, it actually acts more like Libra because Libra's trying to learn from the mirror or learn from the relationship. And so it's these things it'll say in here about, can often manifest as stuck relationships because it's, we're having a sort of a opposition, sun and moon. Okay, and now disseminating moon they say is like, it also is a little bit Libra in its energy to me. It's lovely. It's sort of like usually seen as the most caring people, like the caring nature, because
up until the
225 to 270 degrees.
Yeah, because up until the full moon, it's sort of about the person. Like if you're talking yoga and self-development or self-discovery, the energy is about learning about themselves. So it's very, who am I? It's very self-focused up until the full moon. But then after the full moon, it starts to be, it's a bigger picture. It's starting to come into the transpersonal planets, which are bigger than the self. So it's starting to come into the bigger planets, like, you know, the Scorpio and the Aquarius and the Capricorn and the Pisces, because it's it's not all about just self now. So disseminating is a really caring person. They're usually it's a loss of self-importance. Yeah,
and these people should be doing work out, sharing and working out in society.
Yeah,
helping others.
Yeah, so it's like here, it's liberation from the outside world arises, and to create liberation also for others. So the energy now is to disseminate and to share.
So just and that's my moon phase.
Yeah.
So the last couple.
The last one. So this one again is our next square. And so this one's a crisis. The other one was crisis in action, the first quarter. This one's crisis in consciousness. So it's moving, because it's now in the deeper aspects, I guess, of what's going on in the more, in the more transpersonal planets, in that feeling, like in that energy of what it represents. It's actually now into crisis in consciousness. And again, there's people born on this moon phase have, in our experience with a lot of charts, this crisis in consciousness. Because they're starting to move into the darkness before a new cycle. And then the last one, balsamic moon, is really connected to Pisces energy. It's the end, it's endings. So Pisces is the last sign in the zodiac, and balsamic is this. So it's about moving back to source, or moving back into this. So for people on a balsamic moon phase, meditation becomes really, really something that gives them a lot of freedom and a lot of wisdom. It says ghost and visits and spirit visitations, sensitivity to ancestors and the dead, and it's just about endings. So anything that's or an ending before a new cycle is about to emerge.
Cool. So if you can go onto astro.com and put in your birth details, which will bring up your chart, and then go through and work out what degree your moon phase is on. And if you are having issues with that, you can ask Shae at Astro Healing on Facebook, or Instagram's Astro Healing Shae. Yeah, right. Or contact me and I can ask her to check it out for you, to double check or look it up for you if you're having any issues. But really interesting thing just to look a little bit deeper at ourselves and our psychology, and definitely looking at our lunar moon phase with the fertility stuff, especially if you're wanting to avoid pregnancy.
Why would you want to avoid it?
Conceived my lunar fertility and my physical fertility aligned. And so Namaya has the same moon phase as myself. So we're both disseminating, which is interesting. So, All right. Thank you. The video went a little bit longer than we expected, but so nice to share this with you guys. And please get in contact if you've got any questions. Thanks. Bye. Say bye. Bye. Say bye. Bye. Say bye. Can't work out where to stop it. There we go. Stop video. Oh, stop recording.